Hello everyone, good to see everyone popping up, and Becky, Bess, Joshua, Kim, Lindsay, so great to have you all on board. Thank you for joining this evening, and I hope that you're having a great morning, great afternoon, or great evening wherever you are back home. I'm just going to give it a few minutes to let everyone have some time to log in, but I will quickly chat about the current situation in South Africa while I have a few minutes. Last night, our President Cyril Ramaphosa had announced that our lockdown is being extended by a further 2 weeks. So we've still got 3 weeks of lockdown to endure, which, in all honesty, it's tough. It's not that fun, but obviously it's good time to reconnect with family and just kind of appreciate time with them, which is pretty cool. And for some odd reason, I'm a lot more productive here at home than I am in the office, which is strange. And I'm pretty sure it must be due to less distractions in and around the office, so I can just get my head down and keep working. And I see a lot of you on here have been following a lot of my recent work and have commented on it, and so, which I'm truly appreciative of, so thank you very, very much. And I see Elena has asked or said here, I like your short hair, by the way. Thank you very much, Elena. I really appreciate that. Hi, Sally. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, this is going to be fun. My debut on the Wild Eye webinar, and yet again, I'm truly thankful for everyone popping in here. Mandeep, hi, how are you doing? Good. Well, I can't see you, but I'm happy you can see me. I hope you're doing well, and really cool cheetah image you put out using Andrew Dankwitz's inspiration. It really turned out really cool, so very well done there. I can't hear anything. Sally, okay, got it. You got it. You can hear me now. Sally, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me now, please. Can everyone else nod their head if you can hear me? If you're nodding your head, I can't see you. But Bess, thank you. Thank you. You guys can hear me. Okay, it is 2 minutes past 6. So I think let's get this ball rolling. For all of you on here now, I'm sure you do know what the topic of today's webinar is, because you are, or you would have seen our posts out advertising it. And it is a webinar regarding the most frequently asked questions with regards to African travel. So I've got a list of questions over here that I've received over the years throughout all my lodge-based guiding, as well as my guiding career here with Wild Eye. And there's some interesting ones. And please feel free, if you have any questions throughout this webinar, click the Q&A option, and you can send me your questions there. I will either answer them on the go if it is relevant to what we're chatting about at that particular moment, or I will answer them right at the end. Okay, so let's get started. And obviously we're talking Africa. And I think the most frequently asked question is the one I'm going to start with. And this is it safe to travel to Africa? And the short answer to this pretty complex question, I would say, is yes, it is. And if you think of it, Africa as a whole, as a continent, and the countries within, a significant amount of its contribution and its success is due to foreign currency. And the foreign is obviously coming into or onto the continent and into the countries within. So obviously the private companies or the government institutions know very well that a lot of our money comes from tourism, and therefore they go over and above to make sure that things are in place to ensure the safety of people and guests and tourists and the visitors coming in are at its top level. And they obviously want to ensure that they do stay safe in order to hopefully have them return to Africa. And if you think of it, when we speak Africa, you think safari. And a lot of safaris throughout Africa take place far away from the heavily populated areas, the big cities, the towns, the villages. And so the further away you move away from these areas, the safer it becomes, because you're moving away from these higher and densely populated areas. And you'd also ask yourself, but what about traversing and traveling throughout these areas, from airports to lodges or to game reserves, whatever it may be? And this may be by air, it may be by road. And you still also need to remember that for us, at least, and a lot of companies that have been in the industry for a long time would use well-respected either lodges or travel companies who will then work our transfers for us. For example, if you look at how we operate in Kenya, and I know quite a few of you online here, I see there's still a lot of new people joining, so hello to everyone. It's so great having you on here. Thank you so very much. But speaking about transfers and the way we operate in Kenya is from the moment you land at JKIA, at Jomo Kenyatta International, as soon as you leave the airport building, there will be a Wild Eye representative on there or at the doors waiting for you. May it be Billy or Mercy, there will be someone there to welcome you into Kenya. From there, you then get into a private vehicle, make your way to the respective hotel that you're going to be spending the night at, or if you're coming in the early morning flights, you make your way straight to Wilson. From there, you fly out of Wilson into the Mara, and you spend the week in the Masai Mara with your Wild Eye guides and our East African hosts in the Mara. So at no point, and this is only obviously if you're using a well-respected travel company, will you be left by yourself on your own to sort out your own matters as to how to get to lodges, how to get to the reserve. So the chances of you coming across any particular problems is a lot less, because these individuals obviously know that these are tourists, we need to keep them safe, and they're not going to take you through the center of Nairobi, for example, where it is heavily populated, very dense, and there's a higher risk of crime or something to happen to you while you're out there. So no need to worry about that. But before I move on to the next question, let me ask all of you on here, really think about this one. Sitting back home, wherever it may be, in the UK, in America, in Europe, wherever you are in this world, just think about this. Truly, how safe is it in the city that you live in? All right, I ask myself that question as well. I'm in Johannesburg. I know that there are certain areas that I never want to drive through. May it be daylight, may it be at night, whenever it may be, I do not want to drive through Hillbrow, for example. I know this is a dodgy area, and if I move through there, I'm obviously increasing my risk for something sketchy to happen. So no country in this or on this planet is 100% safe anymore. So with regards to travel in general, and not only travel in Africa, you just need to take the necessary precautions as well. Do not, if you're a big fan of big diamond rings, big diamond earrings, or a Rolex watch, don't be flashy about that, particularly when traveling to international countries, when you move out of your comfort zone to areas that you're not too familiar with. Do not flash these things around. Do not flash money around, because this is obviously just setting yourself up to become a potential target for something nasty to happen. But that just basically covers travel to Africa as a whole. Moving on to the next question. Wildlife safety on safari. Will animals not attack me or hurt me when I'm on a safari vehicle? And coming to think of it, and this is a question I got asked a lot when I was a lodge-based guide, because a lot of you online here now have traveled with us, which we're grateful for. Thank you so very much, and we cannot wait to see you in the future. But a lot of first-time safari goers are quite nervous and quite scared when they go out on their first activity. Helena, sorry, you sent a long message here. No Uber, yeah, from dinner in Yeovil, exactly. So Yelena's just said, and this is relevant to the previous topic, sorry that I'm jumping back here, but Yelena has just said, I don't know if I told you this, but when I was there last year, so Yelena had joined us in Madekwe, she had said no Uber would come and pick me up from a dinner in Yeovil. Exactly. So even the Uber drivers, the people who operate in that line of work, know where the dodgy areas are and where they don't even feel safe to move around in. So yeah, thanks for that, Yelena. I really appreciate that. But moving back to, is it safe on a safari vehicle? It definitely is. But the response I always gave my guests who asked me this question while I was still a lodge-based guide and still today is, I think years back when the safari industry started to develop and kind of found its feet, I think then, yes, it must have been quite a scary adventure being out on a safari, open safari vehicle, driving amongst lion, leopard, elephant, because they weren't used to the presence of this vehicle. Whereas now, over all these years, these animals have become so habituated and so used to the presence of these big green Land Rovers that rumble loudly and smell of diesel and people giggling and getting all excited on board. Now, today, no. There is absolutely no chance that you could put yourself into a dangerous situation. Firstly, because the animals are habituated. And secondly, is because a lot of the lodges that us in particular use, we use very well established organizations. And with myself being on board as well, Gerry, Marlon, Andrew, whoever it may be, we all come out of this guiding industry. And we understand animal behavior. So we can pick up on signs which could be potentially leading to a dangerous situation, like an elephant shaking its head, trumpeting, rearing its head, opening up its ears, a leopard or a lion snarling at us. There are signs that we look out for. And these well-trained guides that we use in these areas and then with us on board obviously can pick this up and we will make sure that if we have to, if need be, we will get out of there to ensure that not only I'm safe, but all my guests on board are safe as well. But very important to also note that when you go out on a safari, usually prior to your very first safari at a particular lodge, regardless as to if you've been on safari 100 times or if this is your first safari experience, your guide will give you a briefing before you head out on safari. So this basically is, do not stand up in the vehicle, because if he has to suddenly pull away, you could fall and potentially get hurt. Also, if you stand up in a vehicle when you're sitting next to a lion, you are going to break that now very common shape, to the lion at least, of this vehicle with people sitting in it. Lions are okay with that. They'll sit there, look at the vehicle, okay, there are 6 people in there, they're seated, and I'm okay with that because I've seen this for so many years and I'm okay with it. But as soon as you stand up, you're breaking that silhouette of that vehicle. He sees a single human standing there. That's when things get ugly. So very important to listen to your guide's instructions, either prior to safari or during that safari, when you're on the ground in and amongst all the wildlife. This is extremely important. All right. Any of you have questions regarding safety on a vehicle out on safari? I know a lot of you on here have been on multiple safaris before. And if you have any questions regarding this, or if you've had any experiences, please share them with us and I'll share it with everyone on here. But then let's move on. What are the best places to go on a safari, particularly for a first timer? So this is quite a difficult question to answer, because I might think that East Africa is the absolute gem and best place to be on a safari. But I'm going to divide Africa into the 2 main safari regions. Let's work with Southern Africa and East Africa. So starting with East Africa, it's obviously renowned for the Great Migration, where millions of wildebeest, hundreds of thousands of zebra, a few gazelle, topi, and eland run in a massive clockwards cycle all year round. For those of you who didn't know, the Great Migration never ends. It's forever going. They keep moving. And this is obviously a safari destination. When you think about it, you see volume. You see loads and loads and loads of animals. I can assure you, if you go on a safari in Kenya during the months of July and September, when the migration is currently in Kenya, in the Mara, you are going to see tons of animals, loads of them. But the variety might not be as great as it would be in Southern Africa. So Southern Africa will be Zimbabwe, Zambia. Mandeep, Bess, I see your questions. What are the best times and places? Okay, I'm not sure I'll cover this later. Yes, I will cover these questions a bit later. Thank you for them. But let's keep on the topic of Southern Africa right now. These are areas like Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa. And in my personal opinion, I would say these particular destinations are best if you're in it for wildlife diversity, particularly emphasizing on the bigger fauna, the bigger game. So your elephant, your lion, your rhino, your buffalo. Southern Africa will be best. You need to remember that the terrain in East Africa and the terrain in Southern Africa is extremely different, and therefore it will accommodate the needs for these animals in a totally different way. Whereas the Mara, for example, is vast and open. So these animals have space to freely just move around in, but they also have to move further for cover. They have to move further for water source and food source. Whereas in Southern Africa, where the environment's a lot denser and it's thick, there's a lot more resource available for the animals in a smaller area. And therefore, that's why the diversity seems greater, is because animals don't move as far as they would in East Africa, for example. And another thing that to me stands out in Southern Africa, particularly for first-time safari goers, I would always recommend going to South Africa first, or our neighboring countries just above us. Reason being is because the guides on the ground in Southern Africa tend to have a bit more enthusiasm when it comes to sharing their knowledge and information with the guests that are joining them. So if I take my experience, for example, I drove I guided safaris in areas such as the Timbavati and the Sabi Sand. And in these areas, when I used to head out on safari, it wasn't a race around Ferrari safari to go find the lion, find the leopard, find this, find that, find this. It wasn't a checkbox safari at all if you were on my vehicle. It was, I tried my best to create an all-round safari experience. So I would stop at termite mounds and chat about a termite mound, its role it plays in the environment, the human uses, the uses for animals. And I would get guests off the vehicle to feel the heat getting pushed out of the chimneys on top of these termite mounds. It was you get the guests involved, and it's really a great experience. Whereas I remember my first safari experience in East Africa, in Kenya, I went alongside Gerry from Walt and Grant Marcus to host the Best of Kenya. And my first impression was like, what is up with all of these guides? It was actually quite frustrating to me, because fortunately our guides, Jimmy's, the Sammys, James, and now our newest guide, Jackson, they've all happily taken in our South African influence, because when we're on board with them, we obviously share information with guests as it would have been in South Africa. And I was sitting in this vehicle in Kenya, and we started off in the Masai Mara, and guides were just racing from lions here, and they were cheetah just not too far off. So they'd spend 2 minutes there, and then they'll bolt to the cheetah. They're there for 2 minutes. They'll bolt away, and then they're gone off in a cloud of dust. And it really is, it just seems like most East African operators are Ferrari safari checklist type of guides. They don't want to spend time explaining animal behavior to their guests. I've even sat in sightings in East Africa where the vehicle next to us, is not a wild eye vehicle, would ask their guide a question about animal behavior, whatever it may be, and the guide blatantly just looks at them, takes another sip of his water, starts the vehicle and drives off, doesn't even answer them. So in my honest opinion, if you want to do East Africa for the very first time, if you're a first-time safari goer, make sure you do your homework and that you're going with a company who is going to provide you with incredible service. But in my opinion, Southern Africa is definitely the #1 go-to safari destination for first-time safari goers. And this next question kind of goes hand in hand with what I just spoke about, but what is the best time to go on safari? And I know, Bess, you asked a question here. What are the best places and times of the year for big cats, especially for mothers and babies? Okay, so I'm going to answer that question as well as the question I have at hand here. What is the best time to go on safari? I will answer mine first, and then Bess, I will get to your answer soon. And to me, again, this comes down to what you would like to experience on your safari. Because seasonal weather and conditions have a big impact on animal movements, may it be in East Africa or Southern Africa. East Africa, for example, animals are following the rains. They're moving because they want water and they want a lot of food because there's millions of them looking for food. Whereas in South Africa, or Southern Africa, things are a little bit different. So for a lot of you on here, as I've mentioned, have been on safari before, and I see some names here I do not recognize. So if you've not been on safari before, but you're planning on doing so, I'm sure you would have heard of two terms called dry season and wet season. So basically, the dry season is when there is no rain in the particular region. And usually what happens with this is because there's no rain, there's no stagnant water lying in little wallows or little low-lying areas out in the field for animals to make use of. So what they have to do is they're going to spend time in and around a watering source, a permanent watering source, which is either a year-round wet watering hole, so a massive dam or a river, or it could be that the animals or the particular reserve, these private reserves, pump this watering hole, so they keep filling it up. And in the dry season, water is obviously life, so these animals are going to ensure that they stay close to this watering source so that they don't have to move too far away to get fresh water. So therefore, game viewing seems to be a bit easier, not only because animals are concentrated around these watering holes, you know where to go look for them and track them down, but also the vegetation is not as lush and not as thick and dense. So it's easier to usually spot animals through this thick vegetation. And, excuse me, and with no rain also comes an element of the bush being dry, and this obviously includes the roads being dry. So road conditions are usually a lot better. They're a bit smoother than they are in the wet season. I'm not going to say they're totally smooth because they can remain bumpy and uncomfortable at times. But one of the biggest highlights when it comes to a safari in the dry season is off-roading is a lot easier, particularly in areas like the Sabi Sand or the Timbavati in South Africa, where guides are allowed to go off-road following big game, tracking leopard or elephant off-road through the bush. It is a lot easier in the dry season than it will be in the wet season, because in certain reserves, like where I guided in the Sabi Sands, when it rained and I think it was rainfall just over 10 millimeters, you cannot do any off-roading until that area dries up, because we're going to obviously impact the environment too much and damage it. So that's one downfall of the wet season, is that off-roading can be quite challenging. So when it comes to, or when are the dry seasons in Southern Africa? Usually from about May into November, and East Africa, usually from about June into October are the best times to experience the dry season. Moving on to the wets, or one more thing, another slight downside to the dry season is that you pay a little bit more for your accommodation and your time in a respective reserve, because the industries obviously know this is the peak season, because game viewing is best. A lot of people flood into these reserves, and so they know they can charge a premium price for this. But now moving on to the wet season, where it is slightly cheaper, conditions and the outcome of the safari might be a little bit different because of these rains. And this is usually in a period of the year where it is a lot warmer. So it's usually the summer months. And with rain, obviously comes humidity. So it could be a little bit more uncomfortable for you as a guest on safari in these regions during this time. And South Africa, you will find this area being from around November into April, with a peak rain being around late November into December and into February. That's when these areas are at their wettest in Southern Africa. Whereas East Africa, things are a little bit different, because East Africa have short rain periods and long rain periods. So when you look at East Africa, if you want to go and experience it in the wettest possible time of the year, you want to go in from about May into April. That's probably their peak of their wet season. Their short rains fall in the month of November, and the rest of the year is pretty dry all around. But if you really think of it, East Africa, Kenya and Tanzania are quite tropical, close to the equator. Late afternoon showers, it's quite a normal thing every day out there. You don't be surprised if you go in there into Kenya in the dry season and it rains in the afternoon. It's quite a norm. But what they mean by long rains and short rains is that long rains, it's just the rain falls for longer periods of time. So there's a lot more water that's hitting the ground. Whereas the short rains, there's frequent rain, but the rain doesn't fall that much. And conditions are not as wet as a result of the rain after the rains. But as I mentioned, it is obviously a bit cheaper during the wet season. Reason being is there's not an influx of tourists coming into the country or these particular destinations. But what I would say, in my preference on being on safari, what time of year would I go? What season would I go? Photographically speaking, I prefer the wet season. Reason being is because it is lush, it is green. So just take this for example. You have a big male lion standing in front of you here, and behind him in the wet season is this beautiful lush green bush, and you have this golden line. You have that color contrast really popping out of the scene. So to me, photographically, I prefer lush green, more wet conditions. Whereas if you're in it to see a lot more game, then yeah, the dry season is the time you want to be out on safari. So Bess, getting to your question, you had asked, what are the best time or the best places and times of years for big cats, especially for mothers with babies? So this is quite a tough question, because lion they usually breed year round, because lion dynamic is quite complicated. There's a lot going on within the lion pride, which are made up of only females and females only. But there's also a lot going on with male coalitions who own these prides. And so with this changeover, as soon as a male takes over, he's going to want to mate with those females as soon as he possibly can in order to get his genes into the population. And this makes it quite tricky to answer the question, mothers with babies. I would say, and something I've picked up over the years, East Africa, for example, what happens is you tend to find lions in a very stabilized pride with a stable coalition of males that dominate the area that they live within, often tend to synchronize their breeding behavior just like 3 months before the migration arrives, for example. Reason being is a lion's gestation is about 3 months. 3 months prior to the millions of wildebeest and hundreds and thousands of zebra arriving into the Masai Mara, these lions will mate with each other. Males will mate to the females. 3 months later, they drop their babies. and then their massive menu just arrives. All these wildebeest pull in, and there's a lot of food source for them. So when mom drops her babies, she wants to make sure that there's a lot of food source around for her to take in, to ensure that she can produce milk for her babies, to keep them alive and keep them going and keep them healthy. Whereas in South Africa, for example, because there is no migration of animals, I've picked up over the years that there is also some form of synchronization when it comes to their mating. And it is usually 3 months before the big rains come. Reason being is because all their prey species, so the impala, the kudu, the nyala, all those kind of animals in Southern Africa, they will drop their babies as the big rains start falling later on in the year. So from December, January, February, that region, you often find lion and leopard and cheetah dropping their babies in South Africa or Southern Africa closer to the end or beginning of each year. But remember, then you're going to be sitting in the so-called wet season, and the chance of rain is quite a lot higher. And to answer the question, the best places to find big cats, so every well-known reserve out there has a good chance of seeing big cats. But if I had to put it down to yeah, that's a tough one, because Kenya, you're going to find a lot of lion. Tanzania, you're going to see a lot of lion. South Africa, for example, if you go to the Sabi Sand or even the Timbavati, there's also a lot of lion in the Timbavati. But if you are in it for big cats in terms of both lion and leopard in particular, I will definitely send you to the Sabi Sand, because this particular area is lion and leopard haven. The southern region of Kruger is steaming with lion and leopard, but not so much cheetah. But if you're more of a cheetah lion fan, then I'll definitely say either the Masai Mara or the Serengeti. So I hope that answers your question, Bess. And if I didn't explain it thoroughly enough, please just pop another question on board here, and I will then get back to you on that. I see Mandeep's also sent through a question. Before I move on, let me go through here. Okay, this later. Okay, yeah, Mandeep, I'll share your answer a bit later. Elena, I also see your question. Okay, well, I'll answer your question later as well, Elena. Charlotte, let me quickly answer yours. Can you go off-road in the Timbavati? Yes, you can. So the Timbavati is divided. So it's one big area, and within it are privately owned farms, and each farm has their own rules and regulations. But I do know that every single one of them do permit and allow off-roading. It just depends on what the animal may be. So some of the reserves only allow you to go off-road for big cats, so the lion and leopard, not for elephants, not for rhino, not for buffalo. But yes, you can do off-roading. And I know the wet season off-roading restrictions aren't as strenuous as the Sabi Sand would be, for example. And then Bess, yes, thank you. Appreciate your time very much. Looking forward to leopards. Brilliant. You're most welcome. And yes, leopards are incredible creatures. You are going to love spending time with them. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. What should I wear on safari? This is a question that comes through more than you'd think, actually. And a lot of the articles you read or websites that you read or whatever it may be may say that you have to wear natural colored clothing. So these are your browns, your khakis, your olives, colors like this. Reason being is because you blend into the environment and you limit the amount of disturbance on the wildlife that you're spending time with. But just pause there for a minute. Think about this. They don't want us to interfere with the animal's behavior if we wear a red t-shirt or a blue t-shirt or a yellow t-shirt. Is the vehicle that you're in crashing through the bush not disturbing the animal? Definitely it is. You often see if guides get too close, that the leopard or lion's ears pop back, or they stop and look. We definitely disturb them while bumbling around out in the field. So what difference is it going to make if I've got a yellow t-shirt on or a red t-shirt on? So in my opinion, I would say that the color of your clothing is not too relevant. Obviously, it just looks a bit neat and cleaner. You're blending in with everyone else on the vehicle if you've got natural colored clothing on. And it's just this whole thing around being on safari, wear your khakis or your olives. But the color of it really doesn't matter. There's one thing I would like to point out though. Don't go on safari and put on a orange t-shirt as luminous as this bottle, for example. You don't want to be sitting in the safari vehicle and have other people pointing at you like, yes, look at that person with this yellow jumper on. Johanna and I hosted a safari in the Serengeti now, and there was this lady with this, like, I can't even describe how yellow this yellow jacket was. It was like this luminous, you literally looking at it, you needed to put your sunglasses on. That's how bright it was. So things like that, please, yeah, don't wear that. But if you've got a red t-shirt, which is a dull colored red or a dull colored green or yellow, perfectly okay to wear. But like I said, please, no Lumo stuff like this, because that just, you become the laughing stock of the people around you if you wear things like that. One recommendation I would like to point out is, speaking of the Serengeti in East Africa, if you're going into an area, I know Serengeti has, or Tanzania has a lot of tsetse flies, make sure that you do not wear any dark colored clothing. Reason being is tsetse flies are attracted to darker colors, so they'll come sit on black shirts, dark olive green shirts, gray shirts, whatever it may be, and they, trust me, they are going to bite you straight through your cotton shirt. You think your insect-free or insect-repelling material is going to save you from a tsetse fly. It's not. They're going to bite you, and tsetse fly bites hurt. I know there's a few of you on here that I have actually experienced tsetse fly massacre with before, and yeah, it hurts. It's not a fun bite. So as far as you can, try and avoid wearing darker colors in areas where there are tsetse flies. So go do your homework before you travel. But before I move on, I know I'm quite a big fan of multicam or camouflaged gear. Just to note that being on safari out in the middle of the Masai Mara is okay to wear these kinds of things. There's not too much of an issue. But I know traveling through international airports with camo or camouflaged clothing, you could pick up a problem, because a lot of the countries, particularly in Africa, are quite strict with their policies regarding this. They do not want their citizens wearing any kind of uniform that represents military attire. So just be sure that if you do like to wear multicam clothing, make sure that you're not traveling in them, but only wear them out on safari. Okay, I think there was another question that popped up. No, it did not. Now moving on regarding as to what we can wear, what should I pack on safari? So this obviously all comes down to what you need and what you are comfortable with. But some of the most important things are probably just a comfortable shirt, so either long sleeve or short sleeve, potentially both, and then also long and short sleeve pants. Reason being, the longer attire will be great for the early mornings or late afternoons when the temperatures are slightly cooler. And then in the heat of the day, right in the midst of or between the two activities, Africa can really get hot, but it can also get cold. And the short attire will come in good handy during, or in good use during the heat of the day. Also with this, pack in a long jacket, a nice warm fleece or jumper, because yes, Africa is not hot all the time. It does get cold. So be sure that you wear or bring along something warm. I know, yes, I was on a safari in Madekwe. I was supposed to be in Madekwe now, and it would have been a little chilly up there. But I was on a safari in Madekwe in 2018 in May, and I think I got colder there than I did on our Iceland adventure earlier this year. It was absolutely freezing cold. So be sure you pack something warm. Also very important are good sturdy shoes. So what I mean by this, it may be trainers, so something that can tie up and close tight to keep your feet secure and safe while out in the field and on safari. But I also always recommend packing in flip-flops or sandals, whatever you call them back home, again, for the heat of the day and while you're in and around camp. Instead of having a hot, warm shoe on, it's nice to have flip-flops on while walking around. Sticking on the heat of the day, the sun out in Africa can really get blistering. So something important to bring along is a cap or a hat. A round rim hat will obviously protect the ears and the neck a bit more than just a normal cap. And then a bandana or a buff, those thin pieces of material don't really warm you up too much, but if the sun is really nailing your face, it's nice to pull that over and it protects your nose and the rest of your face from the sun. Swimwear, if you're an avid swimmer, but binoculars are probably the most important tool you can pack for a safari. Your camera gear, a lot of you might argue and say, no, camera gear is more important, but in my books, the binoculars are a lot more important. And then obviously you want to protect your skin from the sun, so sunscreen is quite vital. A torch for nighttime when you're walking around either in and around your tent or your room, or you hear a sound outside, it's nice to flick the torch on, but also just for milling around and make sure you're not stepping on scorpions or spiders or anything like that. Things like mosquito repellent and any other kind of toiletry or vanity item that you may need while you're out on safari, pack that in along with any needed medication that you need to be taking. But yeah, a packing list is quite a difficult one to answer because that list can go on forever if you ask someone, whereas with me, the list is quite short. I just put in the absolute necessaries and that's all. But hand in hand with what should I pack is what is our travel allowance and how heavy or how much luggage can I take on safari? And again, this comes down to your modes of travel. For example, if you are flying into South Africa and you're coming with us to Madikwe and you're driving from Johannesburg to Madikwe, you can pack as much luggage as you want to. If you're happy to pay for the excess luggage on your international flight, then you can bring as much luggage as you want because it's a road transfer through to Madikwe. But for example, if you're traveling to Kenya and our flight into the Mara, from Nairobi into the Mara, they've got restrictions on it. So a lot of these smaller chartered planes often sit at around between 12 and 20 kilograms of luggage allowance that you're allowed to make use of. It just depends on what planes they are using. And a lot of the time, and this is also important to note, is that they often don't accept hard rimmed bags, suitcases. They only want soft walled duffel bags. And a lot of them also today are quite strict when it comes to having wheels on your bags. They don't want any wheels on the luggage. We often tend, particularly in Kenya, we often work around them. We've got a good relationship with them and they kind of accept it. But yeah, just note that if you are looking at traveling, just be sure that you're reading luggage restrictions for the particular area you're traveling to. But whoever you're booking with or through, for us, for example, we will ensure that you get all the need to know information. So if you're coming on safari with us into the Masai Mara, you will get documentation telling you what the luggage restrictions are, what bags you are allowed to use and what you're not allowed to use. So you should be getting all of these things from whoever is planning your trip and packaging your safari experience. Another very important question, and one that comes out quite a lot, particularly when people travel to tented camps, is there electricity in the camps? And again, this can kind of link back to that first question I'd answer about, is it safe to travel to Africa in general? And the private companies and the governments know that the safety of these tourists are of utmost importance, but obviously the comfort of these tourists are also of utmost importance. So a lot of the camps and lodges and people within the industry understand that in today's world, everyone wants to stay connected. They want to stay charged up. The phones must be full, the laptops must be full, the cameras are a big thing. They need to be full. It's probably the most important thing. Fortunately, you don't have to charge binoculars. But there is electricity in almost every. I have never been to a camp where there's not been electricity. Let's put it that way. Some are a lot more kind of established than others. So certain camps and lodges have electricity fed to them via the grid. So they're getting electricity from the government, and it's there all the time, all day, electricity to the rooms and the main areas and everywhere. But certain camps use only solar power or only generators. Whereas our camp in the Mara, for example, is a tented camp, but we make use, and we remote. We way out on the banks of the river. We're far from the grid, so we make use of solar power, and then just in case of emergencies, we have a backup generator as well. But in camps like ours in the Masai Mara, or there's a particular camp in the Timbavati called Mlani, there are no power points within the rooms. There's a centralized area. Mlani was this little round hut. It's basically behind in their curio shop, but right at the back. You can charge all your gear there. Whereas in our Mara camp, we have a media tent where all the plugs, it literally looks like B&H throws up on the table 2 days into a safari, because there are wires everywhere, laptops, chargers, cell phones, just everything's on that table. There's ample space and enough space for everyone to charge their devices. But a shorter answer to that question is yes. Most lodges will have electricity for you to charge up your goods. And then coming to an extremely important question, and we're nearing the end now, is should I have travel insurance? And I think in today's world, if you don't use it, it's a bit of a silly move. I and we as a brand would always recommend that you do make use of travel insurance for prior, during, and post safaris or travels, because yeah, anything can happen nowadays. I mean, look at what, and I know a lot of companies don't even allow people to book unless they do secure travel insurance first. But look at what's currently happening in the world today with Corona. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy back home. But I mean, it's literally been a world from there, and it's just been turned upside down. And fortunately, because of our policy with regards to travel insurance, a lot of our guests didn't have to cancel their safaris. They didn't lose their money because they had their insurance in place. Everything has just been postponed and moved into later months or into the new year. And so travel insurance is vitally important. I know we've chatted about safety while on safari out in the vehicle. I mean, anything can happen. You can literally, there were so many guests while I was guiding at Sabi Sabi who got stung by scorpions. There's one gentleman, literally, he showered in the outdoor shower. This was a bit of his own stupidity, if I may, but he took his towel, and because it was hanging on the wall, he didn't check it first, he didn't shake it off, he just put it around his body, and a scorpion whacked him. And it was a parabuthus, this gentleman who was allergic to bee stings, and he needed to be evacuated. He needed to be rushed out to hospital to ensure that he doesn't lose his life. And again, if he didn't have travel insurance or medical travel insurance secured, he would have had a big problem. He wouldn't have been able to either get the quick response he did, or maybe he couldn't even then afford that evacuation to get out to an area that could help him. So definitely travel insurance is extremely important, and something that you will really have to consider if you are going to be traveling, not only to Africa, to anywhere in the world today. I mean, you can walk downstairs and twist and sprain your ankle. I know of one guest, she's not on board here now, so I would have asked her if, let me just go through these names. So many of you on here. Thank you so much for taking your Friday morning, afternoon, or evening to be here with me. I really appreciate it. But she's not on board, so I'm not going to share the story. Well, I'm going to share the story, but I'm not going to share her name. But she was walking down a pathway, tripped with her camera bag on her back, and literally fell straight on her face. And she had cut open her lips, her teeth. It was an absolute mess. and she had to get raced from where she was to medical care, which was quite a long way away. And again, if she didn't have, this was just such a freak accident, and if she didn't have the insurance and the documents in place, she would not have been assisted as quickly as she was if she did not have those papers in hand. So extremely important. Before I get onto everyone's questions here, I know Mandeep, Yelena, you guys still had questions. Are there some questions that you cannot answer? Yes, there are. So, and these are legit questions. I took a few moments to sit and think about some questions I've received over the years, but some of them are, what time can you expect the lions to roar? I don't know. If I knew this, I would have been ready right next to them at that time. I don't know when the lions are going to roar. Are the elephants allowed to push over the trees that they're pushing over? I don't know. And even if they weren't allowed to, I don't think they would have cared. They would have done it anyway. Why don't the cleaners at the lodges pick up the elephant dung? Things like this are real. And we really do get asked these questions. And it's pretty crazy. I've got one more here, which is also, what was it? It was something, how often do giraffe hang their carcasses and their kills up in a tree? I mean, yeah, really, come on. I had a guest, and this is a true story. I had a guest in the Timbavati. It was early on in my guiding career. We bumbling along, and I'm a young guide and overly enthusiastic about what I'm doing. I still am. I love what I do. But on this particular day, driving along, and I'm loving life and explaining things about everything and pointing things out, like trying to speak about two things at once. And we come around this one corner, and there's a impala up in the tree. And the Timbavati is beautiful. There was this riverbed with these massive bourbean trees and jackalberry trees, and there was this, it's just stunning. It's like this dark tunnel, and there was this impala carcass with a light falling on it. No leopard, sadly. But these people are like freaking out, saying, where's the giraffe they put in the tree? Where's the giraffe they put in the tree? It took me about 20 minutes to convince these people that a giraffe didn't put this carcass in the tree. It was a leopard. And like, no, but how can the leopard get it up there? Look how big this tree is, this and that. Long story short, I eventually convinced these guests, no, the carcass, this impala, was put up there by a leopard. It's not a giraffe. Giraffe browse. They eat leaves off trees, but they don't put meat that they kill and hunt and kick to death up in a tree. It doesn't happen. So now these people believe me, and they're like, okay, he's the guide. He knows what he's doing, and let's just believe him. Off we go, bumbling along. And it wasn't even like the next day. It was, we stopped for a morning coffee, enjoyed a rusk or two, nice cup of coffee with amarula in. I know a lot of you love amarula. That stuff is amazing. And enjoyed our coffee, get back in the vehicle, bumble along. And there's a thing that animals practice called osteophagia, okay? And this is the practice of chewing, sucking, or licking bones. Come around the next corner, just as we leave coffee break. It was about maybe 30, 40 minutes after convincing them that, no, leopard put this carcass up in the tree. As we came around the corner, boom. Who's practicing osteophagia? It's a giraffe. Yeah, my whole debate with them, I could never ever win again, and probably to this day I will never be able to convince them that it was not a giraffe who put that carcass up in the tree. But I hope that this has answered a few of your questions, everything I ran through now. I see, and I did overlook one or two questions over here. Mandeep and Daruti, you have asked, not sure if you'll cover this later. I did not, but this is a great question, so thank you for sharing it. Is what are your thoughts about safety on walking safaris, places like Mana Pools? So a walking safari will vary differently when you look at Mana Pools, for example. You look at South Africa, those walking experiences are extremely different when it comes to animal behavior and how they'll react to humans on foot. Whereas Mana Pools, over the years, as I spoke about your safety in a vehicle and the animals becoming so habituated and used to the presence of vehicles bumbling through reserves, this goes for Mana Pools and being on foot. These animals have become so used to the presence of humans walking around there on foot that it is actually a very safe activity. I know there are a lot of articles and people that go, or articles that you might have seen of people going into monopools and getting trampled and killed by elephants. And the reason for this is because they are doing this solo, they're by themselves. And the scary thing with this is, for example, if you've never been on safari before and your first safari is monopools, and you come into monopools because it's a national reserve, or national park, you can drive around there by yourself and get out the vehicle and walk around. A lot of the times, the pictures that we share on our social platforms of me standing 10 meters away from this massive bull elephant as he's standing there with his ears wide open, a lot of the time the context can be lost when people see that image. They may either think, let's look at this guy threatening this animal and it is so unethical, this, that, and this and that. Or people may sitting back in the UK, never been on safari before. Oh, it's like a circus elephant, he's tame. I'm going to monopools and I'm going to walk straight to one, and then bam, something terrible happens. So very important to remember, your safety is not only, if you're traveling with us, in my hands, but our local guide on the ground, the man who's walking with his rifle, leading the way. These aren't guys who just came out of Harare into monopools and say, listen, I want to go walk guests into elephants. No, these are guys who've spent many, many, many years out in the field on foot, and they know how to read these animals' behaviors, look for warning signs. And a lot of us actually, particularly in monopools, you can pick up what that animal is going to do long before you even get there. You can read his behavior or her behavior or the herd's behavior long before you even get there. Whereas in South Africa, for example, a walking experience is a lot different. It is a lot more dangerous than it will be in monopools, for example, because the animals aren't habituated and used to the presence of people on foot in the field. So they react very differently. Most animals, particularly the lion and leopard, a lot of people don't know this, are very scared of humans on foot. Because if you look at it, we are the apex predator. We've got forward-facing eyes, ears on the side of our heads, and there's been generation of hunting. These animals know that humans are dangerous things and we can kill them and hurt them. And then in Southern Africa, walking them, they still have this fear within them. They see you on foot. Most lion encounters I've had on foot is either the male or the couple of males, or the pride gets up and just, they give you a growl or two, but they move away, they run, they don't want you there. But you do get the odd one who gets a bit grumpy and charges. Elephants, because they're big and powerful, they feel a lot more at ease around humans in South Africa or Southern Africa. But when you do upset them, things can get quite nasty, because they don't stand back and run away as easily as a lion would, for example. But again, it just comes down to being sure that you are on a particular adventure, walking safari, with a guide who understands what he's doing, a guide who is qualified, and a guy who puts your safety as his utmost important priority on that particular adventure. I hope that answers your question, Mandeep. But yeah, that's about it on that one. Okay, I just want to dismiss a few here that I've already answered, and then I'm going to get to Elena's one now. Okay, question for the end. Are the regions in Africa, well, I wanted to get into, but hasn't yet been able to because of logistics, politics, and what new regions or non-traditional safari destinations do you think are going to increase in popularity in the next few years? Yes, that's quite a tough question to answer, Yelena. So Yelena's asked what regions in Africa that Wildeye, where did that go now? That Wildeye has wanted to get into but hasn't yet been able to because of logistics and politics, and what new regions or non-traditional safari destinations do you think are going to increase in popularity in the next 5 years? So quite a tough question, that, because particularly now with the current situation in the world, we don't really know how or where things are going to be going, particularly in the more kind of undeveloped areas of Africa far north. But I know Andrew Dankwitz has ventured into Ethiopia, which is becoming quite a big tourist destination. There's actually a hell of a lot of tourism in Ethiopia, and for great reasons. That place looks absolutely beautiful, not only species-wise, but the landscapes and the animals out there are also just really incredible. The Congo, I know Andrew Beck hosts safaris in Odzala, and I think they are experiencing a lot more interest of people wanting to come into these areas. But I think purposely they put a throttle onto it. They don't want this influx of tourism into these areas because it is a pristine area. I mean, think of it, Odzala is this massive, huge area with a handful of people in it at any given time. It's you literally standing, you're one of a handful of people in this massive piece of wilderness. So I think a lot of these areas are clinging to that because they know it's a pristine area, it's a beautiful area, and they don't want to overpopulate it with tourism, because with more tourists coming in means more lodges that have to be established. With more lodges being established, you're destroying more of the environment. But yeah, that's quite a tricky question to answer, Elena. A good question, but I'll have more time to think about it and answer this back to you on an email or an Instagram message, if that is okay with you. Okay, moving on. Base asked again, on your tours typically, is it very much focused around shooting, or do guests and guides share some editing time and feedback as well? So this again depends on where the safari is best. It can be, for example, in East Africa. One of my upcoming webinars is going to be about a typical day on safari. And I'm going to be covering a day in East Africa and a day in South Africa, because or Southern Africa. There's two very different experiences. Whereas in East Africa, for example, particularly, say, for example, you come in during the Great Migration. Everyone on that particular safari is there to experience river crossings and wildebeest running through the river, crocs attacking, things like that. It's really dramatic. And there are days where you spend your whole day out there, the majority of the day at times. So from 6 in the morning until like 1, 2 in the afternoon, come back for a quick lunch and head out at 4 again or 3:30 and spend the rest of the afternoon out there. Some days you spend the whole day out there. Whereas we have dedicated safaris like the Madikwe safari I was supposed to be coming back from today is very dedicated to, very focused on shooting, and also very focused on processing and editing techniques and feedback and advice and so on. So it just depends on what safari you join us on. But if you want more of, or best of both worlds, so focusing on shooting, focusing on processing and editing as well, just get in touch directly and I can point out a few great ideas. But in saying that, I mean, if there is a quieter day in the Masai Mara and we head out and there's no wildebeest close to the river or whatever the case may be, we do come back, and that's when we sit in the media tent, and myself and the other guide will always be there to ensure that if you have a question about editing on Lightroom or whatever it may be, we'll be there and we will assist you as best as we possibly can. I hope that makes sense. But as I said, please get in touch with me directly on email or on Instagram, and I can get back to you on that. Okay, let me just close that one. Okay. So Charlotte has asked a question. I asked Andrew this the other night and would love to know what you think too. Would love to travel with you guys, but not sure if I should go somewhere where I could get a great experience or save up for quite a few years and go somewhere like the Masai Mara and get a once-in-a-lifetime experience. This is one amazing experience, better than lots of great ones. I don't know how to answer that one. This is a very, very tough question to answer, Charlotte. And I've also taken this question, for example, when I am out in the field, and the way I look at it is a lot of people do tend to save up for this once in a lifetime experience. And a lot of guests are open about it as well. Particularly when I was a lodge-based guide, they would say they've spent or saved their whole life to do this one safari. And my mindset going into any safari, even if I know you've traveled with Wild Eye or traveled to Africa 100 times, the mindset I have always is treat every single guest as if this is their first and only safari ever. And that's the way it should be throughout the whole industry. But to answer that, I've never had to answer this question, and it's a great question. Yeah, you've kind of hit me blank here, Charlotte. Getting more time in the field lends itself to seeing a lot more in the long run. Reason being is because you'll get to multiple destinations, learn new things from different individuals, see different areas. So you're going to get a lot more in. But for example, the experience in the Masai Mara, I mean, I will never, ever tell someone, don't come and join us in the Masai Mara and rather go do 4 safaris in South Africa, just because I know what our experience in the Masai Mara is like. It is truly phenomenal. And not only game viewing wise and the tuition wise, the team that we have working for us, and Charlotte, if you follow us on online platforms, Dixon, who manages our camp, Tenke, our barman, Mary, who runs our housekeeping and ensures that your tent is clean every single day, Salash and Casino, who fill up the showers. There are so many to mention, and a lot of them can't even speak English, but just that feel you get when you get to that camp, I can promise you within the first hour, you're going to feel like you are part of their family, and you have been part of their family for many, many years. I've been in this industry for, I think this is my 8th year now, going well into my 8th year of being in the lodging guiding industry. And never, ever have I experienced heartache from guests than I do when they leave our Mara camp. I've seen so many tears shed because these people are saying goodbye to who have, honestly, they become true friends and family. It feels like you're literally saying goodbye to a family member. And if you can't come back for the rest of your life, which is probably one of the saddest things I've ever had to see, is guests just bawl their eyes out because they know they'll never see Dixon again, or they'll never see Tenke or Aggie again. And in all honesty, if I had to answer this question off the bat, an experience with us in the Masai Mara for that pure experience and a true, authentic experience, or 4 or 5 other ones, I'll definitely say go for the one true, authentic experience. I hope that answers your question. That was actually a very difficult question. And Besh, you're most welcome. I'm glad I answered it sufficiently. Charlotte, is that good? Did that answer your question? I hope it did. And I hope I answered it well enough. It was a very difficult one to answer. And then let me go have a look around here. I don't see any more questions popping up. Kim, I love Jackson. We all do. He's a good man. Yeah, it looks like that is all the questions. Does anyone have any more questions? Thank you, Elena. Happy Easter to you too. Stay safe to you as well. You're most welcome, Charlotte. I'm glad I answered that sufficiently. Well, if there are no, one more popped up. Thanks for this. You're most welcome for the super informative session, Mandeep. It was also very nice having you on board. Nice, very nice. That's an internal joke between myself, Mandeep, Grant, Marcus, and Daruti. That is brilliant. Yes, this was nice, very nice. Thank you, Mandeep. And thank you all. And the outcome on here has been phenomenal. It's just so great seeing all your names. And I look forward to chatting with all of you directly soon in the near future. if you do have friends that you know that might have missed out on this episode, please, in the future, it is going to become an Instagram TV on my account and Wildi's account. It's going to be a podcast on the Wildlife Photography podcast. So if there are friends that you think may find this particular podcast, this particular webinar useful, please direct them to either my Instagram feed. They can send me direct questions as well. Send me an email at michael@wild-i.co.za, and we'll get this information out to them. But again, I thank you all for your time. I see that there are no other questions popping in here. No? All right, thank you again for tuning in. It has been amazing. I hope that every single one of you have a blessed Friday and an incredible weekend. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay positive. Bye-bye.